The first impact did not arrive with a warning. There was no declaration, no demand, no ritual of first contact. A quiet distortion folded space above the Atlantic, and a beam of compressed stellar matter pierced the planet's atmosphere like a surgeon's blade. New York vanished in less than a second. The ocean rushed inward, then boiled away. Sensors across Earth screamed, then went silent. 4 minutes later, Mumbai burned. 2 minutes after that, Lagos ceased to exist. The Heliox Empire logged the event as a containment action. A routine enforcement strike against a pre-interstellar civilization assessed as volatile, resource-dense, and strategically inconvenient. Their records noted minimal resistance, acceptable collateral, and projected planetary compliance within one local cycle. They never reviewed the follow-up. On Earth, the sky stayed blue. That was the cruelest part. Satellites still traced their arcs. Birds kept flying. For several seconds, humanity did not understand it had been wounded. Then emergency channels ignited. Then the dead were counted. Then the noise began. General Mara Vance stood in the sublevel command vault beneath Geneva when the casualty estimates crossed 100 million. She did not speak. She did not sit. Her hands rested flat on the table as holograms replayed destruction from 6 angles, slowed until every fraction of loss could be seen. Cities did not explode. They failed. Gravity collapsed. Structures folded inward. People were erased without heat or sound. An aide finally broke the silence. "They're not responding to hails." Mara nodded once. "They won't." "Ma'am?" "This wasn't communication," she said. "It was punctuation. The United Nations dissolved before dawn. Not through debate, but irrelevance. Borders lost meaning when orbital debris began falling like rain. Within 12 hours, every nuclear power transferred authority to a single emergency coalition. Within 24, militaries that had never shared data merged command trees without protest. Survival stripped away pride faster than diplomacy ever could. Mara was appointed without ceremony. No vote. No applause. Just a secure channel opening and a voice asking, "Can you do this?" Her answer was quiet. Yes. She had been a logistics commander before the strike. The kind of officer whose victories were invisible, whose failures were catastrophic. She understood systems. She understood supply chains, redundancies, margins. And she understood something the Heliox Empire did not. Humanity adapted under pressure. The first breakthrough came from a destroyed university in Kyoto. A fractured gravity lab, powered by backup generators, recorded anomalous readings during the second strike. A young physicist, hands shaking, sent the data into the emergency net before the building collapsed. Within hours, the numbers were replicated. Within days, they were weaponized, not into guns, but engines. Gravity shear drives did not break physics. They bent probability. Ships no longer pushed against space. They fell through it, slipping along gradients no alien doctrine had considered stable. The math was ugly. The margins were lethal. Human crews volunteered anyway. "Test flight will kill them," a civilian advisor warned during the first briefing. Mara did not argue. "Then they'll die knowing why." The first prototype vanished from lunar orbit and reappeared beyond Mars in less than a second. The pilot screamed the entire time. He lived. After that, time compressed. Factories ran without rest. Old satellites were stripped for mass. Fusion plants rerouted output meant for cities that no longer existed. Every screen on Earth carried the same silent message: "We are not done." The Heliox Empire noticed none of it. Their sensors, tuned to predictable emissions, did not register human movement. Gravity shear drives left no wake, no heat signature that matched known profiles. When the first human fleet assembled beyond Pluto, it did so in darkness, ships clustered like teeth in a closed jaw. Mara addressed them once. Not with rhetoric. With instruction. "We are not invading," she said, her image projected into 100 command bridges. "We are demonstrating. No civilian targets. No population centers. We remove their certainty. Nothing else." A captain asked, "And if they respond?" "They won't," Mara replied. "Not correctly." The fleet moved. Across Heliox space, minor anomalies began to appear. A refueling nexus failed without damage. A relay station went silent, its crew unharmed but stranded. Trade lanes destabilized as navigational constants shifted by fractions too small to predict and too large to ignore. Imperial analysts blamed calibration errors. Maintenance crews were reassigned. Schedules slipped. Then an Imperial probe vanished near a gas giant that had not moved in 5 billion years. In the Heliox strategic chamber, High Executor XYRR Vale observed the reports with mild irritation. "Primitive species cannot reach us," he said. "Archive the incident." The order was obeyed. On Earth, Mara watched the same data with a different expression. Not satisfaction. Not anger. Focus. An aide leaned close. "Ma'am, long-range sensors confirm detection. They see something." "Good," she said. "That means they're looking." She straightened, smoothing the front of her uniform, and turned toward the communications array being assembled behind her. The first message would not be a plea. It would not be a threat. It would be a statement placed into history, unambiguous and permanent. Above her, the planet turned. Scarred, grieving, awake. Earth had been struck first. Now it was moving. The Heliox Empire did not panic. Panic was for species that doubted their place in the cosmos. What followed the first human disruptions was something far more dangerous: dismissal. Reports accumulated across the Imperial network like static. Supply convoys arrived late. Navigation buoys drifted from fixed points by margins that made veteran pilots uneasy. A fortress moon on the Empire's outer ring lost orbital synchronization and required emergency correction thrusters to prevent tidal fracture. No weapons fire was detected. No hostile fleet identified. The conclusion was unanimous. "Systemic error," High Executor XYRR Vale declared, his voice echoing through the crystalline chamber. "Recalibrate and proceed." A subordinate hesitated. "Executor, these anomalies are coordinated." XYRR Vale's mandibles clicked in mild amusement. "Chaos always appears coordinated to those who fear it." The Council moved on. They should not have. The first undeniable failure occurred at the Keltis Gate, a gravity corridor feeding 4 industrial worlds. Without warning, the gate collapsed inward, not explosively, but gently, like a breath released too soon. Thousands of ships were forced into emergency deceleration. Commerce halted. Factories dimmed. Entire regions slowed to a crawl. Still, no enemy appeared. Human vessels moved through Imperial territory like ghosts. They did not strike population centers. They did not destroy infrastructure outright. Instead, they nudged constants, altered balances, and removed assumptions the Heliox Empire had relied on for centuries. A single ship could unthread a system by altering a moon's resonance. A small squadron could silence a communications lattice by adjusting signal delay by milliseconds. Confusion spread. In one command spire, an Imperial strategist slammed a data slate onto the table. "This is impossible. No civilization at Earth's level could calculate these effects." "They are not calculating," another officer replied quietly. "They are experimenting." The laughter stopped. On Earth's flagship, Mara Vance watched the Empire struggle through streams of data scrolling faster than any human could read. She did not smile. She did not comment. Her hands rested behind her back as the fleet executed its directives with mechanical precision. A captain's voice cut through the command deck. "General, Heliox Patrol Group adjusting vector. They may attempt interception." Mara considered the projection. "They're guessing." "Yes, ma'am." "Let them." The patrol group never found anything. Their sensors showed echoes that vanished when approached, shadows where mass should not exist. One pilot reported vertigo so severe he lost consciousness. The Heliox command classified the incident as crew fatigue. HFY convened the council again 3 cycles later. This time, the chamber was less confident. Projections showed declining output across 12 sectors. Supply forecasts fractured. Junior analysts spoke carefully, as if volume alone might summon punishment. A senior executor finally said what others would not. Earth may have survived. Silence followed. That is irrelevant, HFY replied. Survival does not equal capability. The chamber lights dimmed as a new signal interrupted the session. Unauthorized. Unencrypted. Human. The image stabilized into a woman in a dark uniform. No insignia beyond a single mark on her collar. Her posture was relaxed, her expression controlled. She did not wait for permission to speak. You struck Earth first, she said calmly. This transmission exists so history records that we warned you. Several counselors emitted sounds of amusement. One leaned forward. You are addressing an empire that predates your species' agriculture. I'm aware, the woman replied. That's why we adjusted for your habits. HFY rose slowly. You will identify yourself. General Mara Vance. United Earth Coalition. You presume equality, HFY said. A mistake. Mara inclined her head a fraction. No. I presume consequence. With a gesture, she brought a star map into view. Imperial space glowed in layered complexity. Then points began to dim. Not explode. Simply fade. A logistics nexus vanished. A fleet assembly yard lost power. A planetary ring slipped out of alignment and triggered emergency evacuations. Mara continued, her voice steady. We are not here to conquer you. We are here to ensure you never mistake us again. HFY felt something unfamiliar tighten along his spine. This is an act of war. No, Mara said. This is a demonstration. The transmission ended. Across the Empire, alarms sounded too late to matter. Systems failed in patterns no doctrine addressed. The Heliox military mobilized by instinct, sending fleets toward phantom threats while their own infrastructure unraveled beneath them. On Earth's flagship, an officer exhaled shakily. Ma'am, they're finally responding. Mara watched Imperial fleets scatter like startled insects. Of course they are. And if they escalate? They won't, she said. Not yet. She turned toward the viewport, where distant stars bent subtly as human ships passed between them. The Empire had laughed because it believed fear was the ultimate weapon. Humanity had learned something different. Fear faded. Memory endured. And the Heliox Empire was beginning to understand that Earth did not need to be feared. It needed to be remembered. The Heliox Empire did not collapse in fire. It fractured in silence. Across its core worlds, gravity remained obedient, stars burned steadily, and cities stood intact. Yet something essential had failed. The assumption of permanence cracked, and with it the confidence that had guided every expansion, every execution order, every first strike in Imperial history. High Executor HFY watched the damage reports assemble themselves without comment. Supply lanes had stabilized only after entire regions were abandoned. Military fleets were intact but useless, unable to predict where space itself might betray them next. The Empire still possessed overwhelming force. It no longer possessed certainty. Advisors filled the chamber, their movements restrained, voices measured. No one raised alarms anymore. Panic had proven ineffective. What remained was calculation stripped of illusion. HFY felt the weight of centuries pressing inward, traditions suddenly brittle beneath pressure they had never been built to withstand. Provincial governors transmitted petitions demanding explanation. Merchant coalitions requested guarantees the Empire could no longer provide. Priests revised doctrines that had declared imperial dominion inevitable. scholars quietly removed phrases like eternal and absolute from official records. None of it repaired the damage. The myth had broken, and myths did not mend. For the first time in his long tenure, HFY considered the unthinkable truth: the Empire had survived not because it was invincible, but because no one had ever survived its opening blow. Earth had changed that equation. "Locate the human commander," he ordered. "Now." The signal arrived moments later, as if summoned rather than requested. General Mara Vance appeared without preamble. No triumph touched her expression. No anger either. She stood as if the room around her did not matter, as if distance itself had lost relevance. The Empire's symbols reflected faintly against her uniform and meant nothing. "You have demonstrated sufficient reach," HFY said carefully. "State your demand." Mara tilted her head slightly. "We have none." Confusion rippled through the chamber. Some counselors shifted, others stiffened. "Then explain this disruption," HFY pressed. "You attacked our world," she replied. "We responded. This concludes the exchange." HFY's voice sharpened despite himself. "You crippled Imperial infrastructure. You disrupted billions of lives." "We corrected an imbalance," Mara said. "You believed striking first ended negotiations. We disagreed." A counselor interrupted, unable to restrain himself. "If this continues, billions will suffer." Mara's gaze shifted to the speaker, steady and unblinking. "Billions already did." Silence followed, heavy and unavoidable. It stretched until even the chamber's ambient hum seemed intrusive. She gestured, and a new projection filled the space. A Heliox core world rotated slowly, serene and vulnerable. Orbital parameters glowed around it, lines of math humming with potential. With a subtle adjustment, the model destabilized, tides rising, fault lines blooming beneath continents. "We can do this," Mara said softly. "We won't." HFY felt the words land like mass. "Why show restraint?" he asked, the question escaping before calculation could intervene. "Because extinction teaches nothing," she replied. "Memory does." The projection vanished, leaving the chamber dimmer than before. Across Imperial space, human fleets withdrew in stages, reversing impossible vectors with the same quiet confidence that had brought them. They left markers embedded in spacetime itself, mathematical signatures no Heliox engineer could erase, reminders etched into navigation charts forever. Systems stabilized behind them, altered just enough to remain unpredictable, never again complacent. Imperial commanders tracked the retreat without pursuit, aware that following would invite disaster. On a distant observation platform, a young Heliox officer watched the stars settle into unfamiliar patterns. He recorded the changes without commentary, knowing no explanation would satisfy his superiors. For the first time, he understood that the galaxy contained limits, and that one of them now wore the name Earth. Elsewhere, merchants rewrote routes, admirals revised tactics, and explorers marked entire regions as prohibited without protest. No proclamation announced the change. It spread organically, a quiet consensus forming among those who preferred survival to pride. On Earth, the shift was felt more than celebrated. News feeds confirmed the ceasefire pattern without naming it. Reconstruction drones stitched coastlines. Atmospheric processors cleared lingering ash. Families rebuilt lives among scars that would never fully fade. A memorial stood where Geneva's old council hall once had, bearing no names, only a date. People passed it daily, touching the stone as if to reassure themselves that the planet still existed. On the flagship, tension finally loosened. Officers slept in shifts longer than minutes. Conversations returned, cautious, subdued. A junior officer eventually asked what everyone else avoided. "Ma'am, is it over?" Mara considered the question, eyes on a starfield no longer hostile but never friendly. "For now." "And if they strike again?" "They won't," she said. "They've learned the cost." She turned away from the viewport as Earth's sun rose over the curve of the planet, light spilling across oceans that still remembered boiling. Humanity had not won glory. It had won space to breathe, time to endure, and distance from annihilation. In the Heliox archives, a new doctrine was recorded after long debate and reluctant consensus. Earth was reclassified. Not as prey. Not as rival. As a fixed hazard. A civilization that answered violence with precision, arrogance with correction, and annihilation with refusal. The entry ended with a single advisory note, translated across 1,000 languages, stripped of ornament and doubt. Do not strike first. It was not a warning. It was a lesson purchased at impossible cost and preserved by those wise enough to remember, obey, and teach future generations. Generations later, alien cadets would study the incident and ask why the Empire did not finish Earth when it had the chance. Their instructors would answer with the same phrase, passed down without embellishment. Because they struck Earth first. And because Earth came, not screaming, not begging, but certain. Certain enough that the galaxy adjusted around it, quietly, forever. History did not argue. It adapted, endured, recalibrated, and learned. The stars kept count. Forever remembered. End of record. Archived. The galaxy did not celebrate the end of the exchange. There were no victory chants, no parades traced in light between stars. Space simply adjusted, like a body shifting after pain, cautious not to reopen wounds. Routes were redrawn. Distances felt longer. Silence gained weight. On Earth, rebuilding moved with deliberate restraint. Cities rose where names had been erased, but no one pretended the replacements were equal. Architects left scars visible by choice. Memorial corridors ran through transit hubs so forgetting required effort. Children learned astronomy alongside evacuation drills, and neither subject felt abstract. General Mara Vance returned to Earth without ceremony. Her shuttle pierced atmosphere at dawn, heat blooming across its hull, and settled on a plane once reserved for diplomatic arrivals. No delegation waited. No cameras intruded. She stepped onto soil still darkened by regrowth and inhaled air that carried salt, ash, and rain. A civilian counselor met her at the perimeter, hands folded, eyes tired. They've stopped all forward deployments, he said. Imperial fleets are withdrawing beyond their revised borders. Mara nodded. Good. That's all? That's enough. She declined public addresses. Others spoke instead, offering summaries stripped of bravado. Humanity had not triumphed. Humanity had survived a mistake made by someone else. The distinction mattered. Across Heliox territory, the Empire entered a prolonged recalibration. Doctrines were rewritten by committees that argued quietly, knowing volume no longer equaled authority. Shipyards slowed production, not from damage, but reconsideration. Expansion maps were archived, replaced by defensive matrices and risk analyses that included an uncomfortable new variable, human unpredictability. High Executor XYR Vale remained in office, though the position itself changed. Power dispersed. Councils gained autonomy. The Empire did not fracture, but it bent, older and more careful. In private sessions, XYR Vale reviewed recordings of the human general. Not out of obsession, but instruction. The recordings contained no threats. That unsettled him more than any declaration ever had. In one session, a junior advisor asked, "Why did they stop?" XYR Vale answered without hesitation. Because they could afford to. The advisor absorbed the implication in silence. Human fleets disbanded into patrol groups, then into research expeditions. Gravity share technology was locked behind layers of oversight and consensus, its deployment restricted by protocols written with the memory of 3 vanished cities in mind. Power, humanity decided, required discipline more than ambition. Mara visited the ruins once, alone. She stood where a shoreline had been forced inland by boiling seas, where glassy stones still reflected sunlight unnaturally. A child's shoe lay half buried near a marker, untouched by time. She did not move it. Some things were not meant to be corrected. An officer approached, hesitant. "Ma'am, the Council is requesting guidance on long-term posture." Mara considered the horizon, where waves moved with ordinary patience. "Tell them this," she said. "We don't lead the galaxy. We don't police it. We exist. Anyone who wants peace may share space with us. Anyone who doesn't will be remembered." The message circulated widely, translated, debated, and ultimately accepted. It was not law. It was context. Years passed. Trade cautiously resumed. Alien envoys arrived at Earth's periphery and waited for permission rather than demanding access. Cultural exchanges followed, tentative but sincere. Humanity learned it was no longer invisible. It chose not to perform. In Heliox academies, new cadets studied first contact protocols with revised emphasis. Instructors paused longer on the Earth case, letting silence do the teaching. Students asked fewer questions. The lesson had become intuitive. Mara aged quietly. She refused monuments, accepted no titles beyond those required by function. When asked why she never published memoirs, she answered simply, "History already wrote enough." On the anniversary of the strike, Earth observed a minute of stillness. Not mourning alone, but acknowledgement. The stars remained indifferent, distant, unchanged. That, too, was comforting. Far from Sol, a Heliox survey vessel detected a minor gravitational anomaly near an uncharted system. The captain ordered a course correction without complaint, noting the coordinates for future avoidance. The crew did not ask why. The galaxy had learned restraint the way it learned gravity, through consequence rather than instruction. In the end, no treaty defined the outcome. No empire surrendered. No banners fell. What changed was assumption. The belief that power flowed in one direction dissolved, replaced by caution shaped like respect. Earth did not announce its presence again. It did not need to. The void carried memory well enough. And whenever a rising power considered striking first, advisors would quietly reference a distant blue world, a calm woman, and a warning delivered without anger. The thought was usually enough. The stars endured. So did Earth. Time continued, indifferent to pride. New generations grew without hearing sirens, yet they inherited vigilance through stories told plainly, without embellishment. Classrooms taught ethics alongside engineering, reminding students that capability without restraint invited repetition. Humanity's strength settled into culture rather than arsenal. On a quiet evening, Mara walked a rebuilt harbor where ships moved slowly, lights reflected in calm water. A dockworker recognized her and offered a nod, nothing more. She returned it, satisfied. She had never wanted to be known, only effective. Above, satellites traced patient paths, their instruments tuned to watch, not threaten. Earth breathed evenly, scarred but steady. Somewhere beyond mapped space, civilizations adjusted trajectories, calculations shaped by a lesson learned once and never disputed. No monuments marked the victory because none was claimed. What remained was survival paired with memory, a balance held deliberately. The galaxy did not forget Earth. It simply learned to leave it alone. That choice, restraint bound to readiness, became humanity's quiet signature. It required constant effort, endless debate, and the humility to remember why restraint mattered. No celebration followed those discussions, only resolve renewed. In that persistence, Earth found its place, not as ruler, not as victim, but as a constant presence the universe learned to factor into every future decision. The lesson endured, unspoken yet universal, shaping centuries without banners, applause, or further warnings. Ever. Quietly. Permanently.